Hey folks, I just thought I'd do a quick explanation of where my story ideas came from. This is kind of unexpected and impromptu. I didn't announce it or anything, but I've been announcing my stuff lately. Still trying to figure out this new thing, SteamYard. I thought there was a screen share option, but I haven't figured out how to do it yet. I wonder if this is what it is. Okay, I'll try it later. Okay, so anyway, so Cryos and Jade was the first I came up with. I actually came up with that before the Half-Orc Saga. Um, this was uh, I played a very short D&D adventure with a friend of mine where he let me play a gargoyle because he was running the game, and it was actually a margoyle in the gaming system. So it was like a tougher version of a gargoyle. Just the name was stupid, but whatever. But I named him Cryos because of like cryogenic stasis, where someone is basically in suspended animation because he's a gargoyle, so he can sit still for an infinite amount of time. So that's where his name came from. But it was a very short adventure, and it just ended like right after the first adventure because I forget what happened. But a few years later, several years later, I was living on my own with my roommates, and they put out a newsletter, local gaming newsletter called the Oracle, and I I decided to go ahead and contribute. So I contributed. I wrote these 4 short stories called Cryos and Jade. It was Cryos and Jade Labyrinth, Cryos and Jade. I can't remember what the third one was named, and the fourth one was Torn. Um, so it ended after 4 series with Cryos basically giving up his life to save Jade in the end. But the current series deviates much from that. Um, I'm a discovery writer, so I'm still not quite sure how it's going to end, but I have an idea. It is going to fold into the Half-Orc Saga, so look for that. There are hints in the story of it connecting to the world and to the actual story of Half-Orc Redemption and Kindred. Um, but anyway, as far as the Genesis goes, so I wrote that. I wrote the 4 short stories, and they were okay. I was a pretty new writer. Um, and during that time also, sometime later, we started a D&D campaign, and I had come up with all these weird creatures, like a half elf, half pixie, and all this other stuff. And I said, I'm just gonna make a simple half orc barbarian. And it was second edition. No, it was third edition. I'm sorry, third edition D&D. And he had 18 strength, and I forget what else. But just um, I made up this simple half orc barbarian, um, and we were all going to write backstories for our characters. So I wrote this backstory, which is basically the first chapter of Redemption. And after I wrote it, and we were playing for a while, I decided, you know what, I'm going to make this into my first book, because I'd written short stories before, and fan fictions and stuff like that. I said, I'm going to make this my first novel. And of course, it took me 15 plus years, but which I'm glad it did, because my thoughts have changed since that time. Um, I wanted to write it as something that um, that non-Christians would pick up and read. That was a good fantasy that non-Christians pick up and read, and non-Christians can still pick up and read it. But when I finally finished it, it was really theologically heavy, very Christian stuff, lots of verses in it. It was Christ and the cross. And a friend of mine, um, who's also a writer and a Christian, he asked me, if I really want to mix Christ with fiction. And I thought that was a really good point. My wife had said something similar too before that. And it really made me think about it. So I went and I revised. I took out a lot of stuff. And there's still a lot of, I don't say there's a lot, there's some things in there that can correspond to Christianity. But I don't know if I consider it Christian fiction. I'm kind of iffy on that term anyway. Um, but uh, it's I wanted to write a good fantasy story that anyone would enjoy reading. And from what I understand, from what I've seen, that people do enjoy it. If you're a Christian or not, they enjoy reading the book, which is great. Um, so anyway, the first chapter was just um, the backstory I wrote just wound up being the first chapter, and then I added the prologue, and then the other chapters as time went on, which they changed as I wrote them. So and then as I got near the end of Redemption, I started to actually I think it's after I published it, I started to rewrite the Cryos Jade series. So because I had trashed a lot of stories years ago, and so now I have these. I decided to resurrect Cryos Jade, and so I started to rewrite it, and I wanted the writing to be much better than it was, and so I changed the story a bit. And I added some things. I added the Jade Woman was never a part of it. The Jade Dagger was not a part of it before. Before it was just a simple story of this girl who was a princess. Spoilers. Wanted to go on an adventure, and this abandoned necromancer's keep, fortress, whatever. And the original one was she got she ran to the gargoyle. The gargoyle almost killed her, but then the gargoyle thought his master returned, so he kicked her out, and they found out that his supposed returned master was actually some evil being that was trying to take over his realm. So that's all the same, but and that one I had her. She had gained a in D&D. There's these things called Death Knights, which are controlled by like a circlet that the character puts on their head, and they control the Death Knight like a puppet. So she did that, and then because there was a Death Knight in the room with the evil being, the evil being attacked the thing. Kraus attacked the evil being, destroyed the throne, and the whole castle collapsed. So I stuck with some of that, but I got rid of a lot of that because it was a little bit too dark and too much into just the dark side of things. I went ahead and dealt away with that. Although it's just the story did kind of wind up being a little bit dark still, which is fine. I don't think it's too dark. People may disagree with me, and that's fine. I always want to be sensitive to my readers and what they want, what they're looking for. So anyway, I changed a bunch of that, and I decided to go ahead and make it this series, and I got into the later stories, and actually into Labyrinth, because Labyrinth, the title was the same for the second story, but the goal of what they were looking for changed, and it wound up being a much longer story. In the original, the Labyrinth was the longest of the stories, but it wound up being even longer this time, which is good. I think it's a better story. And so now we're at where we're at, and I planned to do 7 books for the Half-Orc Saga. We'll see if it goes that far. I'm going to do at least 3, and that's a good, from what I hear, that's a good amount to do, because just to see if a series works and has feet and legs. If not, that's fine, but I may continue it anyway, eventually, as long as I get the 3 out. But that's the genesis for those. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to put these on my Patreon. I'm going to go through each story of Cryos Jade. Excuse me. And I'm going to go through each chapter of Half-Orc Redemption. I'm going to go through and explain the inspirations for those, my thoughts on those, what was I thinking during the writing, and if there are Bible verses that come to mind when I read these things, when I'm going through these, then I'll bring those up too, how it can correlate to Scripture. I didn't write it as correlating to Scripture, so it's not an analogy for Christianity. It's not neither one of them, especially not Cryos Jade, and definitely not Half-Orc Saga. They're just a couple of fantasy stories. There are Christian themes in it because I am a Christian, and your worldview, whatever it is going to get into your writing, whether you tend to or not. There's a few intentional things in there, but um, it's not an analogy by any means. It's just a fantasy story that has that influence in there. Um, so anyway, I thought about doing videos on each one video per chapter of Half-Orc Redemption, one video per story of Cryos Jade, and I think about posting those on my Patreon. So if you want to sign up for Patreon, I'm going to redo it sometime here in the near future, and redo the tiers, and I'll put those videos, start posting those videos. If you follow my Patreon, the pre-story you get each month, I'm probably going to change that from Mutant Girl to my Cyberpunk series that I'm going to write next year. So you'll get the chapters in advance if you sign up for Patreon at a certain level. So hopefully I'll see you there, and you'll get to see a lot more insight into my stories and what my inspirations and my my thoughts are when I'm writing this stuff. I think it's fun to explore that. So until then, I'll see you, and keep reading and keep writing.